Welcome to the podcast about venture capital, where investors and founders alike can learn how VCs make decisions and reach conviction. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Welcome back for another edition of Investor Stories. On this special segment, the experts describe the most important lesson that they've learned and how that has changed the way they invest. This is the special segment called Lessons Learned. On today's special segment, we have Ali Hamid of CoVenture and Crossbeam. Ali, can you tell us a story highlighting a critical lesson that has changed the way you invest?
So we have a board of directors, and one of our board members used to be the president of a firm that's now hundreds of billions of AUM, and he's just been an amazing mentor. And we were talking about all these different things that other firms have done to get to where they are. And he stopped me. He's like, this obsession of all these other firms that you look up to is a little odd because they were just built in different years than you're being built. And the idea that you're going to win the same way they're going to win is inaccurate. So you should figure out how you're going to win and take the lessons that are appropriate, but not try to become something that somebody else is just because it's cool and it looks interesting. And I think it relates to this concept that I spent a lot of time thinking about, which is like a lot of people do things because they're hard and they ascribe importance to them because they're hard. And that might be getting into a cool club. That might be trying to be friends with famous people. It also might be just even getting into certain colleges because they're hard to get into. So one of the anecdotes that's always stuck with me. So I have a friend who's going to Stanford and I was going to Cornell. And we were talking, I was asking him like, how many kids get jobs at McKinsey after Stanford? And he's like, I don't know, like a dozen. And I was so pissed off because like at Cornell, like maybe like McKinsey doesn't really recruit at Cornell enough, in my opinion. And there was like one kid, and it was like always like the smartest kid in the year, like would go to McKinsey. I was like, oh, Stanford's such a good school. Like I'm pissed off. And I was like, well, how many kids at Stanford go to Goldman? And he's like, well, Goldman doesn't really recruit at Stanford as much. And I was like, really? Like 20 kids a year from Cornell go to Goldman Sachs. And he's like, really? Like, oh yeah, for us, it's like the smartest kid in the grade or the class goes to Goldman and like everyone else goes to McKinsey. I'm like, oh, so like, I just thought McKinsey was more prestigious because it was harder. But like, if you framed it differently, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. It had nothing to do with Stanford or Cornell or McKinsey or Goldman. It was just like happenstance. And I was thinking like, oh, so like if I went to Cornell, I should just definitely go to Goldman because that's easier than going to McKinsey. And if I went to Stanford, I should have just definitely gone to McKinsey, not Goldman, because it was easier. And so like not doing things and ascribing importance to them just because they're hard, I think was a really important moment for me to realize that it's not about being contrarian. It's about being agnostic. I think a lot of people pursue contrarianism for the sake of being contrarian and because it's intellectually stimulating and because when you like a consensus idea, it almost feels cheap, like you haven't earned it. And if you win on a contrarian idea, you feel like you earned it. And I think it's more important just to be agnostic to it.
Love it. On today's special segment, we have Annie Kadavy, Managing Director at Redpoint Ventures. Annie, can you tell us a story highlighting a critical lesson that has changed the way you invest?
Yeah, I think for me, early stage investing is a lot about confidence and confidence building because you're not going to get it right every time. No one ever has, no one ever will, I don't think. And so the question is, how close to 100% can you get? I remember in 2012, I was an associate. And the first deal that I did real deep diligence on was a company called Dog Vacay. And this was a marketplace for pet owners to find pet sitters. It was based in LA. There was a similar company called Rover that eventually the two businesses merged. And this was a Series A. And I, built the model on how big I thought the market was and how much I thought people were willing to pay and how much market liquidity you needed to find. And is it dogs or is it cats or is it parakeets or is it ferrets or fish or what is it, right? And the recommendation I brought to our team was that we pass on the deal. And that was a really scary thing to do. What made it even worse was that the person who did that deal was Bill Gurley from Benchmark, who from my vantage point was God. I was like, I'm never going to be a good investor. I cannot believe that I told us not to invest in this company that Bill Gurley just invested in. How am I ever going to be a successful investor? They should fire me tomorrow.
That's a tough one early on.
And he wrote this really great memo that he published that I have now read probably 60 times in my life. Every time anything that Dog Vacay was in the news, I was just like writhing in pain reading about it. Like, how did I miss that? How did I miss that? How did I miss that? So, what is the lesson there? The lesson there is that even the best don't always get it right. That company ended up being moderately successful for sure. But I think another lesson there was the value in showing your proof of work to yourself. But also I loved that Bill had published that publicly. I don't know if you'll ever hear me say this, but I gained a lot from being able to read his perspective, having had such a kind of experienced trained eye looking at the same business that I was looking at, effectively net new. and the questions that we'd asked, some of which were similar, some of which were quite different.
On today's special segment, we have Brad Burnham of Union Square Ventures. Brad, can you tell us a story highlighting a critical lesson that has changed the way you invest?
Yeah. So I've talked about the experience of recognizing that as an investor, you are not the consumer and you need to be able to separate yourself. Another failure mode that I've personally experienced more than once is investing in the thing that you want to exist in the world, as opposed to, recognizing where we are in the market cycle, where we are in the technology cycle, and what can exist in the world. And so I suppose that's a way of saying, it's probably not actually even correct to say it's just too early, because I think that's kind of a shorthand. And ultimately, it's, too early isn't any different than wrong. And so one example would be a company that I was really fond of called Assembly, which was trying to help build a business around open source that would make it possible for a much more robust and complete open source stack to emerge, and for each of the components of that stack to make a living. And it was, wildly ambitious and flawed in a bunch of ways, but it was an example of something that, I've always believed in the power of decentralized, emergent, bottom-up innovation, startup innovation, and that flourishes in an environment where anyone can come in and add value to any stack. And so this little company was trying to make it possible for people to, pick a portion of a stack, plug into a broader architecture, and then get paid for their contribution to that stack. And it was a great vision. In some ways, you can begin to see an echo of it in the composability of something like decentralized finance and the ability for people to build a service that adds value to an existing protocol, or assemble multiple protocols in a new way to create a new end user product experience. And it's kind of where Assembly was trying to go 10 years ago. But I think it was wrong, not just too early, but wrong.
Very good. That will conclude this installment of Investor Stories. If you're enjoying the program and would like to see it continue, take a moment and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Okay, that will wrap things up for today. Until next time, over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining me.